The opioid crisis has lasted for more than 20 years and has touched almost every community in America. There are few places where the toll is more evident than Cabell County, West Virginia.
There was a sophisticated campaign to normalize the use of opium in medical treatment. And I think in general it resulted in a sea-level rise of the use of opium in medical treatment across America. But what it also did was it allowed a couple of places where it wasn't a sea-level rise, it was a tsunami. And one of those places is here.
Cabell County is among nearly 2,500 cities, towns, and counties that have banded together in a landmark federal lawsuit against the drug industry. The Washington Post has obtained internal documents and videos from some of America's largest drug companies.
Kadian is a drug that can help a lot of people who are in pain.
That show the extent of their efforts to increase opioid sales at a time when the addiction crisis was growing.
Welcome.
We've gone through thousands of unsealed court documents, and what we found is an echo chamber between journalists, pain advocacy groups, and doctors.
They came to the conclusion that there was a national epidemic of untreated pain, and that the answer to that epidemic were opioids. In their complaint, the plaintiffs allege it all began with a corporate business plan.
Used by doctors to relieve severe pain. From morphine comes heroin. These and other derivatives form the group of drugs called opioids.
Opioids once had a powerful stigma. The public was taught they were highly addictive, and doctors would only prescribe them for the most serious cases. So when Purdue Pharma came out with the painkiller OxyContin in 1996, demand was limited. To expand the market, the company had to change the narrative and build a pain movement.
The main area that we can improve on, and the approach that's available to every doctor with a prescription pad, is just for us to do a better job of prescribing strong pain medications, and I mean opioids.
This video was produced by Purdue Pharma in 1998 and sent to 15,000 doctors across the country. Adrienne Fu Berman has been a paid expert witness for the plaintiffs in lawsuits against drug manufacturers.
And what opioid manufacturers did was to make physicians comfortable with prescribing opioids for back pain, for arthritis, for irritable bowel syndrome, and for other chronic pain syndromes for which opioids should absolutely not be used.
Pain is devastating.
Purdue Pharma distributed similar promotional videos aimed at patients.
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive. But that is far from actual fact. Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
So this 1% statistic comes from a letter to the editor to the New England Journal of Medicine. And it was just intended as a letter, not as a study, but that 1% figure was repeated over and over again by the industry to claim that most people would not become addicted to opioids.
Perhaps 1% or less of those people actually become addicted.
Fewer than 1/2%. Less than 1% ever become addicted. Studies show there's virtually no risk of addiction.
That's not true. That somewhere between 10 and 20% of chronic pain patients have opioid use disorder or show signs of abuse.
In the early years, we found that companies such as Purdue Pharma, Endo, and Cephalon were funding pain advocacy groups. These groups appeared to be independent, but in fact they were part of a larger marketing campaign that were promoting opioids as being safe and non-addictive, or less addictive than other drugs that were on the market.
Two major health associations, the American Academy of Pain Medicine and the American Pain Society, have now taken an historic step, formally supporting the wider use of opioids for the treatment of chronic pain.
In 1997, the year of this announcement, the American Academy of Pain Medicine and the American Pain Society received tens of thousands of dollars from Purdue Pharma and Johnson & Johnson. Dr. Joel Saper was on the board of both pain groups.
I think the opioid industry saw the opportunity to get involved with the pain groups, and in many cases the societies became totally dependent on drug company largesse, without which they could not put on their programs. And that gave a lot of influence to the drug companies.
The companies also gave money to dozens of doctors. They had a special term for them, key opinion leaders, or KOLs.
Respected academic physicians were flown around to meetings reassuring physicians that addiction rates were low for opioids and that opioids were underused for chronic pain. That created this sort of self-perpetuating cycle of misinformation that lasted for decades.
There was a media strategy as well. The same physicians authored articles and op-eds in major newspapers. A select few, like New York pain specialist Russell Portnoy, routinely appeared as experts on nightly news.
It still seems rather magical. Pain might be reduced. There's no question that doctors have historically overestimated the risks associated with these drugs for chronic pain.
The strategy worked. In 2000, at a company sales conference, a Purdue executive boasted, "We're burning up the competition with our sales of OxyContin." The long-term goal, he said, was to make the whole pie bigger, not only for us, but for our competition as well.
The market for opioids grew. Companies like Johnson & Johnson and Cephalon started producing highly addictive opioids that contained oxycodone and hydrocodone, and it became a multi-billion-dollar business.
OxyContin is one of America's new prescription wonder drugs. In the right hands, it's a powerful painkiller. In the wrong hands, it can be a killer.
Illegal use of this synthetic opiate is overwhelming law enforcement in a growing number of states.
The opioid crisis had exploded by the early 2000s, when Congress held its first hearings.
A disproportionate abuse of OxyContin may be partially due to a very aggressive marketing and promotion campaign.
I do not agree with the statement made here today that Purdue has marketed OxyContin aggressively. That is simply not the case.
Even as the backlash intensified, Purdue stayed on message.
Despite your good intentions, didn't your company create a monster here that is, in fact, killing people today and turning people into addicts?
No. The monster in this country is the epidemic of untreated pain.
The message was reinforced by paid celebrities, including Jennifer Grey from the movie Dirty Dancing.
Tell us about Partners with Pain and why you jumped on their bandwagon.
Well, it's called PartnersAgainstPain.com, and it's a really interesting educational program. It's a campaign that was meant to help people become advocates for themselves who are in chronic pain. And because
Partners Against Pain was just one of many groups that we came across with innocuous sounding names.
Let's Talk Pain. It's a first of its kind coalition.
Their outward mission was to educate the public, but privately they were really working on behalf of the industry.
Management. Here to help us find ways.
In 2008, the American Pain Society and the American Academy of Pain Medicine created a committee to draft new guidelines for opioid prescribing for doctors across the country. Of the 21 members, 14 had received payments from opioid manufacturers.
I was invited to be on a board to write guidelines, and it was made up of the prominent names in the field of pain. The guidelines assumed that anyone of any skill and learning as a physician was able to prescribe opioids to any patient who they believed needed to be treated for pain with opioids. And I knew that that wasn't valid. I mean, after all, opioids are potentially lethal. I mean, we all knew that.
Physicians thought they were helping their patients, and they had the backing of nationally known experts and national organizations. And if they'd known that industry was behind all of this, maybe they wouldn't have believed these messages.
The demand is staggering, with estimates ranging in the millions of Americans addicted to Vicodin type drugs.
Even as the opioid crisis was raging, drug companies went to great lengths to motivate their sales teams. Opioid manufacturers gave tens of thousands in bonuses to their top sellers. Endo, for example, gave their high earners the chance to drive a company BMW.
In addition to unsealed court documents, the Washington Post has unearthed videos commissioned by opioid manufacturers that shed light on the marketing culture at the time.
Use your speed to get the word out right away, and you'll succeed.
There were dramatic rollouts for new products, like this event put on by Cephalon in 2006.
Introducing Fentora, the first and only buccal tablet
that utilizes effervescence to improve the rate and extent of fentanyl absorption.
In 2008, Alpharma produced this satirical hype video for its new morphine tablet.
It's that Cadian is an awesome drug, okay? It's flat out awesome. It's 8 days a week awesome. It's 380 days a year awesome. So I figure, well, I've got to be a lean, mean selling machine to sell Cadian to all kinds of doctors.
At Purdue's National Sales Conference in Phoenix in 2011, company reps made a music video about a new painkiller called Butrine.
Sold you once, now I sold you twice. They gon' write it up like it's dynamite.
More than 20 years after the drug industry set out to sell America on opioids, the country is still in the grip of an addiction crisis. Prescription pills have been replaced by heroin and fentanyl, and hundreds of thousands of people have died.
We're not interested in justice. We're interested in a reckoning. I don't give a shit if they're accountable. I just want them to pay for what they broke.